One.
It's Marco Polo. Everybody's just Marco Polo.
Hi, everybody. We are live here at #SPSM chat. And if you don't know what that is, that's a suicide prevention social media chat. I'm at Doc Foreman. Your life is different. Now you know. We're really excited to be here tonight. This is our last show of season 4 before we go into our summer hiatus. And there will be more about #SPSM summer and some of the neat things I think some of our community members have planned. We'll talk a little bit about what that is. And then we've already started working on the programming for fall. And this is why we take a summer break. So for those of you who don't know, this is the end of our 4th year of doing this. We take a little bit of a break over the holiday to get, just to have the holidays and get content ready for spring. And then we take a little bit longer break over summer vacation. No worries, there'll be content that'll be rolling. There'll be lots of interesting things happening, but we aren't going to do our regular show. We use that time to change how we do our programming. We're going to be updating our production schedules and planning neat things. And we have a separate hashtag #SPSM Summer. And people can do wonderful live stream programming using the SPSM channel that may not always be about suicide prevention, technology, innovation, data science, social media, things like that, but may be really important things in suicide prevention. I'm kind of excited. Several people have already pitched some neat ideas. So I'm hoping there'll be 4 or 5 really neat periodic shows for you then. I'm also terrifically excited because we are finally getting to the video game episode. And my only regret is that I did not figure out in time, or I did not think in time that we should figure out how to do this on Twitch. And we're going to talk a little bit about what Twitch is and why that's an interesting sort of social media platform for people who are playing video games. And Chris Maxwell is going to tell us all about it. We actually have several members of our SPSM community who were a panel at South by Southwest, and they did a reprise of that at AAS 17. If you go to our blog, spsmchat.com, you will find a wonderful video that was shot live for their AAS panel, so you can see some of this content as it was presented in its entirety. Don't worry, a bunch of those resources are on our blog. I hope you'll read it. It was fairly resource intense. I can't wait to talk about Pokemon Go because that is the video game that I probably play the most, sadly. And I know all the young people tell me they're over it, but we're going to talk a little bit about suicide prevention and Pokemon Go and some of the other stuff. We have several fantastic people with us. They're sort of here below. We'll start with Dr. Bart Andrews. Dr. Bart Andrews, say hello to the people.
Good evening, everybody. Dr. Bart Andrews at Behavioral Health Response, a groovy little crisis center in St. Louis, Missouri. You can find me on Twitter at Bart Andrews. What happened? Did you hear that, Tony? Tony, are we getting some interference in the?
No, I think it was just a.
I'm getting a little. Anyway, I'm excited about the show. I did have very fortunate to the National Association of Crisis Organization Directors, and if you're in the crisis community, you should definitely think about joining NASCOD. It's really easy. Go to nascod.org. But we do a monthly P&R. And we had Chris and Bo talking about video games and suicide. And in fact, it was such a popular show that people had demanded a part 2, which we're having in July. And I learned a tremendous amount from Chris in that process. Lots of cool stuff. And I can't wait to talk more about it. I think folks are going to love this show tonight. Back to you, April.
Oh, I'm so excited. And then we, of course, have Mr. Tony Wood, our IP production. Tony, are you cameras on or cameras off today?
I'm going to take the cameras off, but I just wanted to let you guys know that I think we had a great season. It was exciting. It was an exciting set of shows that April put together for everybody.
Oh, team effort on that one for sure.
She does all the
so much team.
Yeah, so much team.
So much team.
April, and then there's us.
So much team. I think that, Tony, would you agree that who came up with the cooking show, Tony? Wasn't that me and you and Chris? Did we?
I think it was. That was definitely.
It was 3 of us, and we pretty much forced it on April. Do you remember? I mean, there was a lot of resistance around the cooking show.
We had to talk her. Yeah, we had to talk her into it.
We had to really push on. I mean, we had to. At one point, I whipped out the global economy argument, and that's what finally, because she can't resist a big global economy.
I have to tell you, that was one of those ones like, let's just try this. And her numbers on the cooking show, for those of you who've been around SPSM for a while, we actually do take advantage of tracking our numbers, and some of this is wrapping up the season. Our numbers at the cooking show were really, really high. And I remember everybody saying, like, what the hell? Why are we doing this? And it effing worked. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry, Bart.
Well, I don't know if you
Tony.
guys. Well, Tony, do you remember this? Do you remember when we suggested maybe not doing the cooking show, and then April threatened to kill all of us and kill our parents and our children, and we said, "Hey, it's cool, we'll do it."
And anyone else we were associated with.
It was pretty. So the cooking show was successful and saved many lives.
Yeah.
And I think that's an underappreciated element of the cooking show that nobody's talking about.
Yeah, it saved a lot of people. So that intro wasn't very good, but thanks everybody. And if you haven't yet donated your data at ourdatahelps.org, why don't you shift over there and take a look at it. Chris Maxwell.
Tony, who are you? Who are you?
I'm so many things. I'm the COO of Quantify Corporation. We're a startup software company. I'm also the chair of the board of the American Association of Suicidology, suicidology.org. Joined today.
And by the way, actually, we I just really quickly at suicidology.org, there are multiple ways to join, including as a volunteer. We have definitely gotten a lot more outreach from folks with lived experience and folks who are students, and sometimes both, and who are sort of young researchers. Please do contact any of us if you need any assistance with joining or figuring out how to connect with people. We've just gotten a rush of email about that. Reach out to us. Yeah. And then Chris Maxwell. Chris.
Hey. Hi. I'm Chris Maxwell. I'm the coordinator of member engagement for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That's all I got. I feel like I could have gone on, but I didn't want to belabor the point.
How many bags do you own, Chris? How many bags? How many like gym bags, storage bag, body part bags? Like how many if you had to store a lot of bodies, how many bodies could you store?
You got a little specific with that, but quite a few. I might have too many now. Let's not get into it.
No, actually, we should tell the story, because just really a quick aside, we're going to be reviewing this, but do be very clear that a lot of this great content's on our blog, including a video of the actual panel. But Tony forced a new app on all of us, and Chris and Bart and Tony and I have been messing with it. It's Marco Polo. If you guys haven't seen it, you should totally get on it. Follow us. Like, totally love to connect. And Chris Maxwell was going to the gun range today with his friend, and he was like doing a gun tutorial for Bart and for Bart, and showing like how you would disassemble and clean a gun, and sort of related to our lethal means and gun safety episode and like messaging episode from a few weeks ago, right? Which honestly, those were really cool little shots you did with your phone. You want to tell everyone about that?
Oh yeah, no, it was just a spur of the moment thing. Like April said that I was going to the range this morning, and I was cleaning a gun, and so I had my camera set up on a tripod, just showing how to disassemble it, what parts were important to clean. It was just a quick offshoot thing.
And by the way, like, you could do a cute, like, not cute because gun things aren't cute, but you could do a really cool sort of tutorial, like, here are the basics. And you could also include a bit about suicide, gun safety, about storage, things like that. And almost anybody could create one of those, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the cool thing about this Marco Polo app is it's very similar to Snapchat, although it does like create a running story of the
I like it better
things.
than Snapchat.
But here's the thing. Here's what makes it really cool is that you can do it among groups. So like we have this little group that we're sending like our messages to, our video messages, and we can all see them in our group. It's just different.
But I, unlike Snapchat, I figured it out a lot quicker. So I think Snapchat really is designed for, adolescent girls to sort of, it's sort of to be a little bit obtuse and friends have to show you. Like I feel like we sort of all griped about Marco Polo for about a half day and then figured it out, and we're able to get up and rolling really quickly, which is what I liked about it.
Yes.
You're such a bye, Chris. Chris, we're going to get right into it since you're being that way. Chris, tell everybody about the South by Southwest panel. How the heck did this happen?
Yeah, so this was the brainchild of Desiree Stage. She saw the the call for proposals for the South by Southwest 2016 come out, and really, along with a couple of other people, came up with this idea to do something on video games and suicide prevention. It was something that hadn't really been done at South by Southwest, or really any sort of these kind of larger, expos that happen across the country. We have a really good ability in this field to talk to each other. That is important. And so we felt like it was really important to talk to the general public and get out into the spheres that that we just don't generally reach out to. So along with Des and David Walensky, who runs an interesting project called Don't Die, I believe, where he interviews people on video games and mental health issues. And then at the last minute, we were able to secure Bo Pinkham from the Crisis Center of Johnson County, and he's amazing.
And hold on just a second. Bo! That's all.
So yeah, no, and honestly, it was just a perfect panel. Like we had it down to a science, talking about video games in a very unfamiliar and relatively unpredictable realm. Like we really had no idea what sort of questions we were going to get from people who, who were doing these video game things, and we didn't know what sort of audience we were going to be talking to. We suspected that we would have a few people in the audience who were game developers, and so we kind of targeted the presentation towards game developers and how game developers might be able to collaborate with suicide prevention folks. And then for AAS, obviously, we had to kind of spin that. So, but yeah, no, I mean, that was really the idea, that we just wanted to get in front of an audience that doesn't talk about suicide.
And I'm gonna say I don't think they start out to talk about suicide, but we're gonna talk about that. When we were getting ready for this episode, you produced a hella bibliography. And we've already got Dr. Rob Kramer's on the Twitter chat, and he's already tweeting about the link between things like Call of Duty and acquired capability. But like many things, the connection between video games and suicide is like really, sort of complex and nuanced in a lot of ways. So it's not all video games or make you kill yourself. There's a lot more going on. Like, tell us a little bit about what the content of the panel was like and how you went about developing it.
Yeah, so really, I mean, what we try to we frame it in a sense that video games, when you talk about mental health issues in video games, when they're presented, it tends to be surrounding things like addiction, or violence, or several other things. And so, but suicide isn't generally directly the focus in video games. It's used as a shocking, like, narrative. Sometimes it's something to throw off the game player, or it's used as a way to kill off a character, unfortunately, sometimes. So very similar to a lot of the other media that we see, these are the kind of things that are presented. And so we started off by, like, why isn't suicide part of these games? Like, why is that not being addressed? And when it is greatly and responsibly. And so what we do is we lay out a few screenshots of some more recent games that touch on suicide, but in a way that's a little bit iffy, right? So the first one we show is Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto has an option in the pause screen to kill yourself. And basically, that's an option that they give you so that you can respawn. And by respawn, I mean, your character dies in the video game and you reappear somewhere else. You reappear at some selected starting point. So this brings up another issue. So when you're talking about the nuances of suicide in video games, and actually, there's a really old article that I should go find when I have a second here, from GameSpy, which is an old outlet that doesn't exist anymore. But there's a really cool article where a guy outlines the fact that suicide really has played a core role in video games for a very long time. If you think about respawn as a potential way to kill yourself in a video game. Going back as far as like Mario. If you are playing Mario and you're running along and you know that there's a secret and you're trying to access the secret area and you miss it, the only way that you can go back is to jump off a cliff and die and respawn. So he makes this case that really suicide has been an integral part of video games basically since their inception. And so trying to kind of like use what we know about suicide now, and where game developers are kind of using suicide as more of a narrative piece, not necessarily in an appropriate way. So that's kind of how we start things off.
In an inappropriate way. So, I mean, what you're naming two ways that are really, really common. So one is the acquired capability piece. And for those of you who, I mean, I know we tagged a lot of the folks from the public health Twitter chat. We just feel like video games are a way that people might be talking about mental health now, or where mental health protective factors or risk factors may be happening that are very, very social. And it feels like it's not in public because you're in your room, but these are really, really places that people connect. So we tagged y'all on this. But there is that piece of acquired capability, Thomas Joiner's interpersonal theory. Bart, really, the early games that were born in the arcade, Tony says we need to mention. We'll definitely talk about arcade games. But so that is that people are more at risk at suicide if they feel like a burden, if they're irritable and withdrawing from others, and then they've practiced or they've figured out how to cross that line. And there is that rehearsal of harming self and others that might make it easier to suicide. And there is definitely a way that kind of rehearsal is happening in video games. The other piece is a lot like what we talk about with Dr. Stephen Stack, which is that suicide is a dramatic narrative, and in video games it's used like it's used in a lot of media, which is that it amplifies the intensity or the drama of the narrative of the game. But some games are different, right, Chris?
Right. So one of the other examples that we give is really interesting from Borderlands 2, which this game is a really kind of cartoony, cynical, satirical style video game. And one of the missions that you actually receive, spoiler alert, from this guy that is giving you these goals is to go kill yourself.
Oh my!
Yeah. And so one of the, in the course of completing this mission, you run across some train tracks, and there's a sign with a button that says like call a crisis line, right? So it's like in your face. It's kind of, but it's meant to be hilarious that there's a crime here. And I think what Bo was saying, because I haven't played this game, but what Bo was saying is that when you actually do press that button, like nothing happens. So and then the other part of it is that when you actually, if you choose not to kill yourself, you fail the mission. But if you do kill yourself somehow, you basically respawn, and the guy that gives you the goals is like laughing at you, like ha ha ha, you actually did it. That's so ridiculous.
So that tells me some really interesting things about public health in terms of like video game designers. Video game designers are just members of the public like everybody else. And so we've apparently done a great job that people know that lifeline numbers are posted in locations where people might attempt or die by suicide. And we've not done a really good job educating them about the effectiveness of that, nor have we done a good job about educating the public about that this is like, if it were having a heart attack, it would also not, like there are probably ways of dying that they would not have used because they're common, and that would be really painful for people. And probably the way that people think of suicide is sort of a thing that doesn't really happen to you or anyone around you. Like that might be, what do you think? Oh, you're on mute, Chris.
You cut out there for a second on my end.
Oh, sorry. So I'm betting that video gamers think that suicide, like much of the public thinks suicide is really, really rare. It's like easier to make a joke about it. It would be considered in poor taste to make jokes about dying and not surviving and help not arriving for really common ways of dying, like a heart attack or cancer. But nobody realizes, I think, how common suicide is. And probably we've not done a good job of educating the whole public, and gamers as part of the public, like They know enough to know that those signs are there for folks who are at risk, and not enough to know that this is really common.
Right, and I think, you know, so there's two things here, and you touched on the community basis a little bit just a minute ago, and that's a really important aspect of video games altogether. So we kind of have this stereotype of people who play video games sitting isolated in their homes, you know, surrounded by Mountain Dew and a computer screen, but you know, and that they're isolating and they aren't talking to people. But in reality, what happens is that for each of these video games, these large top-tier video games is dropped, a community forms instantly online surrounding this video game. So forums will pop up for each of these big video games where hundreds of thousands, if not millions of users are going on and talking about this video game. Quite often, suicide and depression and in these mental health forums, or in these video game forums, totally separate from the video game topic itself. So people are talking about mental health, they're talking about suicide in these forums, and sometimes receiving support, a lot of times not receiving support. So the other side of that is that because people don't understand how prevalent suicide is, and how serious talking about it in really harmful ways can be, that's the other like side of the coin, is that you have people, you know, on these forums or in the in-game chat features, if they're pissed about getting shot, or if they're pissed about getting beat up or whatever, a lot of times you'll see the GKY, go kill yourself, pop up like as a retort.
And so just to remind people, that's like one of those shorthands that a lot of folks who are texting are using. So GKY, go kill yourself, is one of those things.
Right. So the thing to keep in mind here, and the thing that I try to reiterate every time we talk about this, is that people are talking about mental health, they're talking about suicide in these places, and suicide prevention people aren't in these places. Have I think a responsibility as a field to know about these, kind of like a lot of the other stuff that we've talked about on SPSM. There's these spaces out there where people are talking about suicide, and we aren't there. So I think as a field, we have a responsibility to get there and know about these things.
So speaking of getting there and knowing about these things, there are a couple of interesting phenomena. We're not going to cover everything tonight. The first is oh goodness gracious, I'm gonna call it the wrong thing. Strange World, right? Do I have that right? Do I have the title right?
Life is Strange.
Life is Strange. I knew I was about ready to say Stranger Things, and I'm like, no, that's a Netflix thing, Foreman. My excitement with names extends to so many things. But can you talk a little bit about that game plot? Because that's actually a different take on things.
Right. So Life is Strange has one of the better narratives and approaches to talking about mental health and suicide. And basically your character is a young woman who is going through life. Basically, you're making these decisions based on the circumstances that are presented to you, and for each one of these circumstances you can choose one or two or three different responses. You walk through settings and you have to do these certain things a different way, but mental health and suicide come up relatively frequently, and one of them, and we show screenshots of this in our presentation, but one of them is a girl that your character knows has gotten up on top of the roof of the high school and is threatening to jump because of stuff that's going on with her. And so your objective is to go up and basically talk her down and keep her alive. And I mean, if you don't do it correctly, she'll jump. But the responses that you're given are relatively spot on for what somebody in that situation would probably think about saying. And some are helpful, some are less helpful. But in reality, I mean, like it's very realistic in the sense of like, this is what you would be presented with if that was to happen in real life.
And like, this is in a lot of ways the opposite of 13 Reasons Why, which is like that suicide is inevitable, that it's caused by when other people do bad things and life is unfair, there's this photo album of injustice or this cassette album of injustice, and then you inevitably must die by suicide because the world doesn't act right. In this game, it is suicide is preventable. You can use your skills to help somebody, and you can practice until you can do it. And like that's and this particular game was so popular. And I am not a video gamer by any. I mean, I've played video games, but not that many, and it's not my medium. But I can tell you that I watched this. I watched this played by gamers. Some of you know who Felicia Day is, because if you're a geek at all, I mean, you know who Felicia Day is, and you know. She will do live streams of her video gaming. She and her brother often do this, and she played that game, and I watched them do this. And the whole watching her play the video game, and there weren't just narratives about suicide. There were a lot of narratives about mental health, wellness. I think there were some about self-harm. There were ones about abuse and mistreatment, and how do you change things, or what is the right thing to do. I mean, there was a lot in there that was fairly public health focused, I think.
Yeah, no, and the other the other aspect that I didn't mention was that your character has the ability to mess with time. So you know, if you do mess up, you basically just time warp back into a starting point that gives you another shot. Yeah, being able to go back and like learn from what you've said before and how to respond better in some of those situations. In all seriousness, it's probably one of the best representations of mental health issues and suicide in the gaming field that we've seen. Des actually had the opportunity to talk to one of the creators of it, and she said, you know, how did you guys get the language so spot on? Like, how were you able to, like, what kind of research did you do? And he's like, we really didn't do much research. I'm an attempt survivor. So this is kind of coming from a very personal place. And this is how we kind of informed ourselves on what sorts of things to include.
So one of the game designers had lived experience and used that to design something really effective and having a really good public health message. You know, this is one of those situations where I think my experience talking with other professionals in our space is that they say, oh, the kids are playing games, we'll build a game. I'm like, you should not, because you're an expert, and we'll have Bart comment on that. You're an expert in mental health. What you should do is be good friends with the people who do build the games and let them get to know you. They'll build really compelling games on their own. You're just a really good resource. Bart, go ahead and comment.
Well, I think that this, for one, I always get nervous whenever professionals get involved in things. I always get creeped out that they're going to start trying to censor stuff, right, or shut things down and stop things. So I think one of the things that's really interesting when we did this show for NASCON, people are excited. They're like, we want to reach out to the video game developers. I mean, they're putting this stuff in games. Oh my God! And it's like, you should slow your roll, sister. Look. One of the things that kids are attracted to are things that we all find abhorrent or we think are wrong or bad. And trying to push safe, healthy, wholesome messages to youth. If we just did that, if we just made our kids watch really healthy, wholesome, non-violent things, then wouldn't the world be a better place, Chris, April? Can't we all agree that we just okay, I think that you know, the ass clutching crowd always gets me a little ass clutchy. I think there's some things that were very powerful in learning about this from Chris. One is that there's communities happening, and there's things that are exciting about these games, and kids, youth, young adults are drawn to them. And I think you're going to see that as this progresses, it's going to be older adults that are drawn to them, because this population keeps getting older, right? So it's not even going to be kids anymore. And I don't think it even is kids. If you look, there's a lot of middle-aged gamers these days, right? Chris, is that accurate, right? Yeah, he's nodding.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So here's the things that really strike me. Instead of instantly wondering if this is a risk factor, which it could be, I think we can look at some evidence that suggests it could be a risk factor. How can we leverage these things, these communities in these games, to find a way to connect with people and have conversations around suicide and how we help and how we engage? The other thing that I think is working on a crisis line, one of the things that's really obvious to me is that for many folks, video games are a major coping strategy for them. When life really sucks, when things are really bad, and it's escapism. And escapism, a lot of our escapism, guess what, guys? A lot of our escapism is violent, it's nasty, it's not real worldy, right? It's the opposite. And reading the book Tribes right now, if you haven't read Tribes, please run out and read it.
In love with that book, and the last.
It's a good book, but there's so much sense in that book about some of these things that we think of as being horrible things are actually things that have an important function in our social structure and in community structures and in self-coping. And so I think that those are things that I start thinking about. I realize how many times when I played video games where I would kill my character because I was stuck in a place, right, where I didn't want to have to reboot and start the whole thing all over and go back to the last save point, where if I could kill my character, I'd pop up in a place that was closer to where I wanted to be. I will tell you that I hated doing it, and I don't know about you, Chris, but there was something even back then that just always made me a little squeamish about it. I have to say, I would do it, but it wasn't my first choice, right? So the video game community is a community first. And I think that's one of the things, regardless of what the community is, just like Reddit and Suicide Watch, there's communities that spring up around these things that scare the crap out of people. And instead of being fear-driven and shut it down, or let's get them to talk or do things the way we want them to do it, because we all know safe messaging is going to solve the suicide problem. I'm behind that 100%.
So let's talk about community, and I want to eventually get to just a brief explanation of Twitch, and we've got about 15 minutes before we start sort of transitioning to end of season stuff. But Checkpoint Mental Health, someone from the Let's Play program said, have we heard about Checkpoint Mental Health game and video series?
Which series?
I haven't. Checkpoint Mental Health and Games video series, and I have not. I don't know if anyone else has.
I have not, and I had the opportunity to meet the person who runs that program, and she's really great, and so I'm glad that she's on the chat tonight.
Oh, hi!
But she's actually using
to introduce us.
She's using video games with kids in a group setting as a way to foster this community and provide coping skills and resiliency through video games. So it's really cool, and that's an extension of taking this this online community that people build and putting it into a real world environment. So it's really just another example.
And they
but if I could,
that they're interviewing people in the game development community who have mental health issues and have used games to cope. Huge support in the India community. Dude, what's this person's name? Chris?
I forget what her name is. Unfortunately, I feel really bad about that.
Listen, at Let's Play program whose name Chris forgot. I can't promise you I'd do better with your name, but direct message me. I think that would be a really cool SPSM show for next year. We'd love to talk more about this. I think things like this are really cool. But anyway, go ahead, Chris.
To Bart's point about using games as coping, and like, yeah, dude, whenever I get to a point in a video game, especially like a single player game where the mission is the drive, like you have to complete certain things. If I got stuck, if I messed up and I had to kill myself, it was never the first choice. And in a lot of video games, you are actually penalizing yourself in some way. Like you lose a life, right? Like you have a life counter, you have hearts or whatever it is. So you get penalized that way. You lose money, you lose whatever's in your rucksack, depending on the game. So you're penalized for it. But one of the things that Jess Stolman-Rainey, she was actually in attendance during our AAS panel, and one of the things that she tweeted out during that panel was, the idea that going through and enacting either self-harm or suicide during a video game, could that possibly, that ideation, a coping strategy in itself? And so not necessarily acting on these thoughts in real life, but using that as a way of like getting some of this negative energy out and these thoughts and using it in a way that's not harmful. So it was just a really interesting perspective.
So, and
that
here's
you
the
reminded me
thing
of.
about that, which is if you're just old and cranky and have a license, you're like, well, we don't know if that's bad, but it could be. So no, because you're a gatekeeper about public safety. It sort of is sometimes your job to not recommend things that have potential risk. But I mean, that's a question that's really an empiric question, right? And some of the Twitter chat members have asked about what are the benefits. You might be building community. You might be acting out some things that you've been ideating about, but maybe the video game is a chance to rehearse a different option or a different solution. It's probably not video games just make you kill yourself. It's probably a complicated relationship. Video games are just a medium, and a lot of the content that happens, especially the social content with other people, the storylines, the narrative, all of that's constructed. So we might be able to build in elements that are risk reducing and coping skill enhancing into what we're already doing, possibly, but we need to collect data, right?
Yeah, we need to collect data, and we need to be having these conversations on a more field-wide basis. The research that's been done so far has been really minimal, with really small numbers of participation. And really, the research that we've seen, it shows associations sometimes, depending on length of play, what type of games people are playing. But they have not been able to do any sort of randomized control trials or longitudinal stuff that actually shows which direction it's going. So most of the research that's out there just shows that if there is an association, we can't tell if kids who are already feeling suicidal are playing more video games, or if playing more video games makes you feel more suicidal. So we just need more data, and we need to be doing it, industry wide.
And this is really being borne out more in the Twitter stream. Like, just be clear that a lot of these video games, although video games are not for boys only, and my 11-year-old daughter has opened up a world to me of new video game development, of things that are really designed to be engaging, like outside of gender. But we have a lot of at-risk folks who are males. That's the number one, men in the middle years, and we have these young men coming up behind them. This is a place that folks who are at risk tend to be. It makes sense for us to learn a lot about that environment, especially since it's so designed. We might be able to have an impact, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why, just like when we were talking about 13 Reasons Why, the media, like the relationships that we form with media have to be proactive. They have to be preemptive. We need to be forming these relationships way in advance of a game, us going in and saying, whoa, 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 you did that suicide scene wrong, or that suicide narrative was all screwed up and it used all the wrong language. So forming these relationships with game developers on the front end and realizing that they have to sell video games. We cannot tell them, like Bart was saying, we cannot get into this rut of trying to censor them preemptively. We have to rely on those relationships that we create to allow enough trust to form, so that if a game developer is considering putting suicide in, they hit up somebody in the suicide prevention field, and say, hey, are we doing this, okay? Is there something that we should be looking at differently? Is there a different way to engage a certain audience that might be playing this video game, rather than, coming out with a video game that's potentially screwed up narrative-wise or with uncertain language, and then having us come in and be like, but the fact is that these are it's $1 trillion industry. They are everywhere. Yeah. Everyone's playing them, so we need to be involved.
In suicide prevention, it's a lot of folks in it are from the mental health, and where we learn that just telling people what to do is just like the most ineffective way to impact behavior. And somehow there's something about media that we start behaving in ways we never would in the therapy room. In mental health, we often say it's the relationship that heals. It's the relationship that is the vehicle that you create change and growth and healing. You'd think that we would internalize that we need better relationships with journalists, better relationships with artists, better relationships with Netflix. And we need, it looks like, since there are a lot of young men playing video games, and suicide is a theme and is behavior that happens there, we probably need better relationships with game developers. And I'm so glad that you were at South by Southwest and then you turned around and brought it to AAS. And that, that we have that content. I feel like that's exactly, what we're talking about, which is to start intentionally making sure that suicide prevention expertise is going to the professionals that we need it to go to, where they are, so that they can think about the issue and have a relationship with us. I think that was a great thing that you did. And you meaning you several people, was not just Chris Maxwell.
Yes.
You're such a turd.
It looked like Bart wanted to say something. Yeah.
Well, I first of all, I like that. I like when Chris says rucksack. Chris, can you just say rucksack for us one more time?
Rucksack.
How many rucksacks do you own, Chris?
18.
18 rucksacks, everybody. Tweet that. Tweet that. I think
he's got an end of days compound going on.
I don't know. It's Kansas, the whole state's. It's a different world over there. Since I'm from Missouri, oh my God. Okay. The only thing, wait a minute, Kansas does do one thing. It makes Missouri look better.
Except for in basketball, sure. But we're not going to go down this.
Or if you're in Kansas City, everybody knows to go to the Kansas side. I mean, you can visit the Missouri side, but you live on the Kansas side, because you do. Because
you have to. Because anyway,
Kansas City.
I think so. Some of the things that are really important about this is one of the things. How many people? Okay, so maybe the best thing we can do is develop a healthy video game. And get the kids all to play a healthy video game, right? Because kids, how has that ever worked? Anything that is intentionally designed to be good, right, doesn't really ever take off, right? So
no, I'm gonna lie. I'm gonna disagree because my kids will introduce me to what they do, and there's this great video game, and they loved it, and they said, "Mom, you're gonna love playing this with us." Mm-hmm. And we all went into CJ's room, and it was all about empathy and taking care of these cute little bunnies in space. And they were way into it, both my, nearly 15-year-old teenage boy and my, 11-year-old vaguely sociopathic, girl. And I could play, and it was all about empathy and kindness. And it was a kick-ass narrative, and the narrative was really good, and the graphics were fun, and the game control was neat. And I think they actually did intentionally design in some pro-social stuff.
So, okay. I don't know.
But how much money did that game make?
Yeah.
It's a really popular game, and I'm going to talk about Undertale, which all the boys were.
What's the name of the game, April?
I don't know, the bunny game. I don't know. I'll call over, but
it was so big and huge. Chris, do you know the name of the bunny game?
Undertale was the hottest game of 2016, and the way that you were the most successful was through empathy, avoiding shooting back, expressing compassion, and it was a very, very strong. There was strong maternal characters. There was a mother character. Have you played Undertale? It was a lot of fun, and it was super popular. And it was designed by adolescent boys, and it was deeply pro-social. And it was so loved by all the little boys young men that I knew, the teenage boys I knew, that they were playing the game multiple times through, and they were taking their computers to play at each other's houses. And it was super, super popular. It was the game of 2016.
I stand corrected. Chris, do you stand corrected?
Chris was already correct. He didn't take a position like you did, Bart.
He nodded. He did.
I do feel that there is a slight difference between the indie games, and the indie games are really popular. The games that pop up on your phone are really popular, and there's a lot of really popular lower level indie games on Steam and some other places where you can get games, but they do not even stand up to the AAA tier of Call of Duty games or the big ones that sell millions and millions of copies. And something's going on over there on Bart's.
I'm sorry. I googled Undertale and clicked on it, and I got this. This game is tagged for mature audience: mild fantasy, violence, nudity, graphic, sexual themes, mild language, and mature humor. Maybe it's a different.
There you go.
Maybe it's a different Maybe it's a different Undertale we're talking about. I'm sure there's more than one. Undertale.
In terms of humor.
I'm gonna click back away from that. Okay, so there's this game.
It was no Grand Theft Auto, and what I like relationship between a boy and his adoptive mother very, very, very seriously. And somehow they've managed to make it sound real. And I played it, and I hung out with the boys while they played it. And for them to make it sound so racy, that is a feat of marketing. And why aren't we why aren't we doing really good pro-social game development that does have good mental health components and making it sound filthy as fuck? Boys would probably play it then, but what, I don't know.
But that's the key. I mean, we have to understand that these people have to sell video games. They have to make it, this marketing, if that's the game that we're talking about, that is genius, because they're going to sell more video games by making it sound more intense, more racy. And if we can put our anxiety in a box and shove it away as a field about how marketing works in the video game industry, and we're just there and we create these relationships of trust, that's the way that we can make a difference. But if we go in trying to say you can't have this kind of racy content, you can't even really talk about suicide. When we actually asked the AAS crowd, mind you, these are all suicide prevention people. We asked them at the very, towards the middle of the presentation, after we've kind of set up how important talking about this is and how the communities are already talking about it, we said, now is it better for video games to have bad suicide prevention or suicide content, or no suicide content, right? And I think maybe 2 or 3 said bad content. Maybe a handful of people said it's better to have bad content than no content. And it kind of made me stop, because I'm like, okay, the people here in these video games are talking about suicide. They're talking about mental health. Suicide might be going on behind the screen. You're hearing "go kill yourself." So focusing on the ones that have bad content, creating relationships with these people, and talking about how we can work together. But ignoring the problem altogether goes the way that we know doesn't work. Right. It's like asking kids not to watch 13 Reasons Why. It doesn't work.
Not going to happen. Not going to happen. We're here at the 15-minute mark, and I wanted to give us a little bit of time to sum up sort of the year of season 4. But I want to wrap up about video games. First of all, at Let's Play Program said yes with a lot of exclamation points in all capitals. Undertale is amazing. Lots more exclamation points. Just saying, Bart. And and how can and I know that SPSM a lot of times we sort of have a call to action, but the issue is, if we know we have a population that is at higher risk, and we know where they are, and one of the places that a lot of young men are is on video games, and that is ubiquitous. I just don't know many young men who don't have video gaming systems. We have multiple at our house, and I'm not much of a gamer. And I don't honestly know a lot of middle-aged men who don't play anymore. Why aren't we building relationships with game developers? There you go. Add that to the list. Do we have any final thoughts about video game content before we sort of switch to season 4? Chris, Bart, Tony?
The only thing I'd add is that I think we're really hung up. I don't want to say hung up, but the focus of the conversation has very much been on the content of the video games. Is it promoting suicide? Is it suicide preventive? What can we do? The other end of this we haven't talked about is video game sellers, and there's a huge industry here that might be very willing to support suicide prevention efforts. And so rather than, regardless of the content of their game, what a great group to get involved into suicide prevention messaging and sponsoring events, and just being engaged with in general, in terms of rather trying to get them to change the content of their games. Maybe the first step is to get them involved in the issue at large, right? Because I think a lot of times those sorts of efforts are often have a bigger impact long term than these attempts to kind of, you're doing this, and you've hit on this, April, you're doing this wrong, you could do this better, instead of, hey, this is really serious, and people that buy your games are impacted by suicide. We think you could really help with this. How could you help us? And I think that's the other thing.
More importantly, how can we help you? Because do you have influencers who are sort of running your online communities? Would they like assist training? Maybe this is distressing when people start talking about killing themselves or about mental health issues. Maybe they'd like some support so they can help members of the community. Can we help you get that?
I think these are all great conversations to have. So that's my parting comment on video games.
Woo woo, Bart. Chris or Tony?
I don't know if we locked up, but yeah. So I'm gonna channel Bo here for a second because
Sorry.
he always tries to push this in our talks, but really and we didn't get to talk about Twitch very much, but Twitch is a massive platform where people are playing a lot of video games and they're doing it live, and so they have there are video game players out there that like they will host 24-hour marathons, and they have tons of followers. And recently there's been a few of these really big are going out and raising a whole bunch of money for organizations like AFSP or the Lifeline. And so creating inroads with some of these people might be another route that we can make these communities a little bit stronger. You know, he always talks about like reach out, just Google, you know, Twitch game player, like your area, basically like New York or Phoenix or whatever, and try to reach out to this person, see if they can't work with like a local crisis center to raise some money, or a local suicide prevention agency or something like that. Yeah, again, just go ahead.
Yeah, because a lot of them who are, a lot of folks who are raising money have lived experience either as an attempt survivor, as a loss survivor, and they may or may not tell us that. But I mean, a lot of people are affected by suicide. We know that's a really, really common experience. Of course, that is happening with folks who are on Twitch. And of course, when there's content about suicide on Twitch, which we will, I'm gonna put a note for us to talk about what Twitch is for fall, hopefully, and get more involved in that. But that's a great idea, Chris.
Yes.
Yes. Tony, do you have any comment before we move on to end of season? Tony is on mute. So Tony has been on mute and blocking video. He's number one been on travel, but honestly, he's been a little under the weather and has been taking a little bit of a break. But everybody be wishing him well. We're going to talk a little bit about season 4. So I'm going to put everybody on the spot. Top 3 highlights for season 4.
Chris will go first.
Was that this season?
Yes, this was season 4.
Oh God, the time when you pulled out an AR-15 was pretty amazing.
You know,
yeah, no, I mean it's just been full of like it's been so amazing to see like that SPSM is on the leading edge of what we need to be talking about in this industry. So we had did we have Rob from Coco on
yes.
a while back, and that was really cool, talking about you know, the support and empathy integrating with ongoing social media efforts, and I think they show a lot of promise, and they're gathering data, and it'll be really cool to see what happens with that. And then other than that, I mean, it's been an amazing season. So yeah.
Bart.
Well, I think Chris took my top 3, so I'm just going to have to improvise here. That was the danger of letting him go first. We did talk about what we were going to talk about in the pre-show, and Chris just kind of took my cheat sheet there, which we'll talk about in the post-show. Chris Maxwell. Now, I think that I thought the show that impacted me, because there were so many good shows. The filmmaker. Show with the youth who and that was such an incredibly powerful show to hear what young folks who are actively involved in making art and film around suicide and suicide prevention, what their reaction was to 13 Reasons Why, what the conversation meant to them, and I think it was just an incredibly powerful show, because there was a rawness and a genuineness to it, and we didn't agree, everybody didn't agree on everything, but it was a really respectful, deep conversation. And I thought that was, I think that's one of SPSM's trademarks, is that we can talk about really tough stuff, and we don't have to, I don't want to agree. It'd be so boring if we agreed on this stuff, right?
Right, no groupthink here.
So I think that was really powerful. I think that also when we were talking to Joanna Slay and Mike Conway, about the ethics of social media. I mean, that is one of the pieces, that the ethics involved around research around suicide, particularly the social media end of suicide prevention, is such a new area. And we're one of the few folks talking about that. I think that was really powerful. And then who was the amazing young lady that we did the dark web show with?
Oh, Amanda Towler, that was so fun.
That was an incredible show, and it was a little bit off the beaten path for us. And also we exposed the community to things. I learned a ton in that show. I thought that was an amazing show. I mean, I could go down the list. There's so many good things, but those things stand out. I do have to say that when you broke out the assault rifle, I do have to say that I didn't expect it. It was.
You knew it was coming. I told you I had it.
I may not have been paying attention because sometimes I have mini seizures and don't hear things. A medical problem.
I'm going to say, oh, Tony Wood, are you back? You're off mic. Tony, do you have a top three?
Top three, no. Bart just went down the list and stole some of mine. Once again, we had all this clever plan where we were going to do a handoff, and they just took the best stuff and ran away like usual. So Allie was great. Allie again was great. But I have to say that Becky was good, and Lisa, the Futurism show, was a good show.
The Future Show.
That Mike Conway show. I mean, I don't mean to go on about it, but that because Mike Conway is one of the few ethicists that has direct experience in suicide and social media, that's a groundbreaker. Because in the future, when this is all an old thing and people go back and laugh at our old platforms and how we did all this stuff, that is one of those things that we actually made a contribution to the community. Mm-hmm. Versus just talking about things that are exciting that people are doing, which is great. We're really good at singing pickles and assault rifles.
We are.
I think that
if it's a phallic symbol, we have it.
Rubber meets the road. Systems of oppression is okay.
So I'm going to say the thing that I was excited about was the Dirk Hobie explanatory versus predictive models that we started to educate the field about that. Of course, we had Amanda, we had Chelsea, who was really talking about national databases and did a really good job explaining sort of the state of affairs in our national databases about just counting suicide and what the complexities were about that. We had several. I mean, our fall and spring openers were just fabulous. We have actually. So, from the start of the year when we had realized a year ago with our programming that there weren't really good written ethics, to having an AS panel about it, to having Dr. Coppersmith, who's a, regular SPSM alum, publishing about practical guidelines, to having Mike present, to connecting with Joanna Slay, to making a real contribution about data donation and about doing data science research and doing social media surveillance research. Like, we did a great job. We definitely did it with singing pickles. We definitely did it with the dark web. We definitely talked with filmmakers. I mean, when we think about this year, in my mind, when we think about how we're planning our programming to do really engaging, thrilling episodes, and to be able to repeat that week after week after week for these long block seasons, I think that says a lot to our wonderful team. We're going to be heading out with Slack, and I think we're going to be expanding how we do production so that we can just keep up with. I think this was the first year that I just thought, I can't keep up with all the production requests, and this was the first year I was like, I really have to have help. And if it weren't for Bart and Chris and Tony, we just couldn't have done all the fabulous things we did. But there were so many people who have contributed content generation, and we're just going to get more organized about this going into next year. I want to let everybody know about SPSM Summer. We do not have specific calendars for things really nailed down yet, but we have several, and I mean several, really cool things that are in production right now. There's going to be a really, really neat conference that's going to be talking about social media and data science and mental health. It's going to be happening in London. SPSMers are going to be helping. There's some neat stuff that we're doing with some national partners that I can't mention yet. We'll be mentioning soon. Sally Spencer-Thomas has got a cool Twitter chat coming. I've talked with Margaret Hines, and we're hoping to have some folks with lived experience do some neat live stream event. We had a wonderful event pitched to us about doing gender and not doing sort of binary gender, but being much more inclusive in suicide prevention, how we talk about gender, and it's a cool event. And we had another one about lived expertise that was pitched with us with another SPSMer that is currently in development. I just want you to know, if you have an idea for a show, some things, I know we really narrowed and focused what our regular season content is about, and we never run out of stuff. But there's a lot that our audience is interested in that we can't always cover as a part of our regular season. So do me a favor. Send me a message on Facebook, send me a message by email, direct message me on Twitter. If you've got a really good idea, pitch it to me. SPSM Summer is the perfect place for developing and trying that, where we'll let you try your chops at hosting, pitching an idea, organizing a show. For our regular members of our community, this is where we say, here, we've built this great channel. Do you want to give this a road test and see what great things you can contribute? We built it for you. Please do let us help you make content that is important to this community. So follow hashtag SPSM Summer. And follow our Facebook page. That's where and follow Twitter, like follow us on Twitter. That's where we're going to be announcing most of the stuff. If you want to be involved with AAS's Slack, we've been working with some wonderful early career suicidologists, and we're going to be probably making the production of this a lot more team oriented, just because there's more than I can produce just me, and we're starting to get to where there's more than we can produce just the four of us. Any final comments? This is final thoughts moment.
I did one. I'm just gonna say this. I'm sorry. The evil apples. I did not like playing evil apples. I just. Do you remember that? Do you remember that app?
That was so
Evil
fun.
Apples app sucks. No, it sucks. It's horrible. It should be just no. It's Tony.
That was fun holiday.
No. You have a different definition of fun than I do.
That was rough.
It was a rough thing. I love this community. Thank you all for sticking with us throughout the year. We couldn't have this show without all of you, and coming here every week and getting on the thread and seeing the folks and new folks and folks that have been with us. What a treat. So thank you for spending the year with us. Appreciate it so much. I look forward to it.
Chris, final thoughts.
Bart stole what I was gonna say. I just had to. No, but seriously, yeah, I just want to echo that, because honestly, like it's always just really humbling to see everybody get on the thread and make magic happen. So you all are awesome. I love you people, and I can't wait to see what comes out of season 5.
Tony Wood, final thoughts.
Thanks everybody for another good year. I appreciate it all of your help you've done. There's a lot of people out there that have helped in so many ways throughout the community that we couldn't do any of this without you.
And I want to just say, for role of schools and suicide prevention, just to let you know that my husband, Brian Foreman, who's a school administrator, and our SPSM alum, Dr. Jonathan Singer-Zing, as many of you know, actually did a thing on suicide prevention in schools. That was an SPSM summer topic from last summer, and you can find that in the archives for @YMHE Action Group, just because I want to make sure to do that. Final thoughts. We will see you in August. Stay tuned. Cool stuff is coming. And then in the middle of that, I'll be at the pool. Have a great summer. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Right.